First strike. The stars had always beckoned humanity. What began as tentative steps into our solar system eventually became confident strides across the galaxy. By the year 2297, human colonies dotted dozens of worlds throughout nearby star systems, each one a testament to our species' determination and ingenuity. Among these colonies, New Horizons stood as our crowning achievement. Orbiting the habitable moon of a gas giant in the Ta-CD system, New Horizon was home to over 15 million souls. Its biodomes stretched across valleys and plateaus, its spaceport bustling with trade ships from across human space. After 70 years of development, it had become a true second Earth, a self-sufficient paradise that represented humanity's future among the stars. Captain Maya Chen stood on her balcony overlooking New Horizons' central hub, watching as the artificial day cycle began to dim. The colony's massive light arrays simulated a sunset, casting warm orange light across the sprawling cityscape. Tomorrow marked the colony's 70th anniversary, and as head of New Horizons' defense force, she had spent weeks coordinating security for the celebration. "Captain, incoming transmission from Fleet Command," her AI assistant announced. Chen sighed. "Put it through." The holographic display flickered to life, showing Admiral Javier Santos, her former mentor and current head of the United Earth Defense Force. "Maya," he greeted her warmly. "How are preparations coming along?" "We're ready, sir. 3 patrol cruisers in orbit, and all defense platforms at full capacity," she replied. "Though I still think it's excessive. We haven't detected any non-human intelligence in our explorations so far." Santos chuckled. "Better safe than sorry. This celebration will draw attention from across human space. The president himself will be arriving tomorrow." "We'll keep him safe," Chen promised. Neither of them could have known that this would be their final conversation. At 3:17 local time, as most of New Horizons slept, the first anomalies appeared. Deep space monitoring stations detected gravitational distortions at the edge of the system. Before analysts could determine their nature, the distortions multiplied, spreading like a web around Ta City. In her quarters, Chen was awakened by a colony-wide alarm. As she rushed to the command center, she witnessed something impossible through the transparent ceiling of the main corridor. The stars were disappearing, section by section, as if being swallowed by an advancing wall of absolute darkness. By the time she reached the command center, chaos had erupted. Communications with Earth had been cut. The 3 patrol cruisers reported being surrounded by objects that absorbed all sensor readings, perfect voids in space that defied detection. "Status report," Chen demanded as she entered. "Unknown entities, Captain," her second-in-command responded, voice shaking. They're everywhere. No electromagnetic signature, no heat, no radiation. They just exist." On the main screen, one of the patrol cruisers suddenly vanished from their tracking systems. No explosion, no distress call. Simply there one moment, and gone the next. "Get everyone to the shelters," Chen ordered, "and send out a distress beacon on all frequencies." But it was already too late. The darkness descended on New Horizon like a shroud. Defense platforms fired blindly into the void, their energy weapons seemingly absorbed without effect. Chen watched in horror as sections of the colony began to disappear, not destroyed, but erased, as if they had never existed. In her final act, Captain Chen activated the colony's quantum entanglement communicator, an experimental device meant for instantaneous communication with Earth in dire emergencies. Her message was brief: unknown attack, indetectable entities, colony falling. They erase rather than destroy. Save yourselves. The quantum signal reached Earth 8 minutes later. By then, New Horizon and its 15 million inhabitants had ceased to exist. No debris, no radiation signature, no evidence of destruction. Just empty space where a thriving colony had once stood. On Earth, the response was immediate and unprecedented. For the first time in human history, all nations, corporations, and factions united with singular purpose. Within 24 hours, the United Earth Council declared a state of existential emergency. 3 days later, every shipyard in the solar system had been commandeered for military production. Admiral Elena Reyes stood before the emergency session of the World Council, her weathered face displaying the calm determination that had defined her 30-year career. "We have identified the aggressors," she announced to the silent chamber. "Our deep space observatories captured quantum-level disturbances consistent with the attack pattern at New Horizon. We've tracked these disturbances to a system 60 light-years from Earth." "What are they?" asked the Council President. "We don't know," Reyes admitted, "but we know where they are, and we know what they've done." The plan that followed was audacious beyond imagination. Every military vessel in human space was recalled. Every shipyard began producing warships at a pace previously thought impossible. Civilian ships were retrofitted with weapons platforms. Experimental technologies were fast-tracked into production. 6 months after the fall of New Horizon, Admiral Reyes stood on the bridge of the UES Vengeance, the largest battleship ever constructed by human hands. Before her, the tactical display showed what many had thought impossible. A fleet of 700,000 warships, ranging from nimble fighters to massive dreadnoughts, all assembled in high Earth orbit. "All fleet commanders report ready, Admiral," her executive officer, Commander David Park, announced. Reyes nodded. "Open a channel to the fleet." As the communications officer complied, Reyes gathered her thoughts. The faces of 15 million lost souls seemed to watch her from the shadows of her mind. "This is Admiral Elena Reyes to all ships," she began, her voice carrying to every vessel in the vast armada. 6 months ago, an unknown enemy struck without warning or provocation. They erased New Horizon and everyone who called it home. They gave no demands, sought no negotiations, offered no mercy. She paused, letting her words sink in. "Today, we answer, not just for vengeance, though we carry that in our hearts. We answer because if we do not, humanity may cease to exist. Our enemy believes they can erase us from the universe without consequence. Today, we prove them wrong." Throughout the fleet, officers and crew listened in solemn silence. "We go to face an enemy unlike any we have encountered before. An enemy that does not destroy, but erases. An enemy that may not even comprehend us as living beings. But know this, we are humanity. We have survived ice ages and plagues, world wars, and climate collapse. We have always endured." Reyes' voice hardened. "And we will endure this. We will find this enemy. We will learn their nature. And we will ensure they never threaten another human world again." She nodded to her communications officer to end the transmission, then turned to Commander Park. "Prepare for synchronized fold space jump, all ships." The technology was experimental, dangerously so. Simultaneous fold space jumps of this magnitude had never been attempted. But the alternative was a conventional journey of 60 years, during which Earth and its remaining colonies would be defenseless. As the countdown began, Reyes thought of her wife and daughter on Earth, of the home she might never see again, of the 15 million souls who had no chance to say goodbye. "Fold space drives engaged," Park announced. "Jump in 3, 2, 1. Reality bent around the vast armada. Stars streaked into lines, then vanished altogether as 700,000 ships tore through the fabric of space-time itself. When they emerged, it was into darkness unlike anything Reyes had ever seen. Not the darkness of space, which was always illuminated by distant stars and galaxies, but a more fundamental absence, as if light itself was being consumed. And within this darkness, they saw them. Vast geometric structures that seemed to both exist and not exist simultaneously, their edges defying traditional geometry, their surfaces absorbing all light that touched them. "My God," Park whispered. "What are they?" Before Reyes could respond, the sensor officer called out, "Admiral, we're detecting quantum fluctuations identical to those recorded at New Horizon. All ships, battle stations, Rise ordered, her voice steady despite the cold dread building in her chest. We've found our enemy. The Voidborn have revealed themselves. As the human fleet moved into formation, the darkness began to move toward them, not as individual ships or entities, but as a cohesive wave of nothingness that threatened to engulf them all. The greatest battle in human history was about to begin. Retribution. The first salvo came not from human weapons, but from the void itself. Space distorted between the fleet and the approaching darkness, creating a gravitational lens that bent light and matter alike. 3 destroyer-class vessels at the vanguard of the human fleet were caught in the distortion, their hulls compressing and stretching in ways that defied physics before vanishing entirely. Evasive maneuvers. Admiral Rice commanded. All ships maintain distance and establish firing perimeter. The human armada responded with practiced precision, separating into tactical groups that surrounded the Voidborn entities. From the bridge of the Vengeance, Rides watched as the first coordinated attack began. Thousands of kinetic projectiles and energy weapons firing simultaneously at the geometric darkness. Most disappeared without effect, absorbed by the impossible physics of the Voidborn. But some, specifically those utilizing quantum-entangled warheads, created visible ripples through the darkness, like stones thrown into a black pond. They're vulnerable to quantum disruption, Commander Park observed, studying the sensor readings. Conventional weapons are useless, but the QE missiles are having an effect. Reyes nodded grimly. Recalibrate all weapons systems. Focus on quantum destabilization. She turned to her communications officer. Send the new targeting parameters to all ships, and order the science division to analyze every scrap of data we get. I want to know what these things are. As the battle expanded across the star system, a pattern emerged. The Voidborn did not fight like any conventional enemy. They did not seek to destroy human ships, but to envelop them, to erase them from existence just as they had erased New Horizon. Any vessel caught in their dark embrace simply ceased to be, with no debris or energy signature to mark its passing. After 18 hours of continuous engagement, the human fleet had lost nearly 30,000 ships. But the Voidborn entities were also diminishing, their geometric structures destabilizing under the quantum assault. In the Vengeance's science bay, Dr. Eliza Corey had made a breakthrough. The quantum physicist had spent the entire battle analyzing the data streaming in from the fleet's sensors, and what she discovered chilled her to the bone. They're not ships, she explained to Admiral Reyes, who had come to hear her findings. They're not even technology as we understand it. They're space-time constructs. Explain, Reyes demanded. Corey gestured to a holographic display showing the complex mathematical models she had developed. The Voidborn exist partially outside our dimensional framework. They perceive reality differently than we do. When they erase something, they're actually folding it out of our space-time continuum. Are you saying New Horizon still exists? Just elsewhere. Hope flickered briefly in Raya's eyes. Corey shook her head. Not exactly. It's more like they've been shifted into a state of quantum non-existence. Neither here nor gone. Just indeterminate. Why attack us? Rise asked. What could they possibly want? I don't think it's about want, Corey replied. Based on the patterns of their behavior, I believe they perceive our very existence as a threat, not to their lives, but to the fabric of reality itself. At that moment, a lieutenant burst into the science bay. Admiral, we've located what appears to be their point of origin. A massive gravitational anomaly at the center of the system. Reyes returned to the bridge to find the tactical display showing a colossal geometric structure at the system's core, a perfect dodecahedron that seemed to exist in more dimensions than the human eye could perceive. That's their homeworld, Park said quietly, or the closest thing to it. Reyes studied the structure, her mind racing through options. The battle had already cost them dearly. Over 50,000 ships lost in the first day alone. But humanity had the numbers, and now they had understanding. All ships, she commanded, Convergence Pattern Omega. Focus all quantum weapons on the central structure. The human fleet moved like a vast machine. 650,000 warships forming concentric spheres around the void-born homeworld. As they closed in, the darkness between them thickened, reaching out with tendrils of nothingness to claim more human vessels. But Rise had anticipated this. The outermost sphere of ships released billions of quantum decoys, small devices that mimicked the quantum signature of larger vessels. As the Voidborn reached for these false targets, the inner spheres of the human fleet advanced, weapons charged. The assault on the Voidborn homeworld began with a synchronized barrage that would have annihilated any conventional planet. Quantum disruption missiles, gravity lances, and exotic matter bombs struck the dodecahedron simultaneously from all directions. For a moment, nothing seemed to happen. Then, a shudder passed through the entire system. Not a physical tremor, but a distortion in reality itself, as if the underlying fabric of existence had been torn. The dodecahedron began to unravel, its perfect geometric form collapsing in on itself. As it destabilized, a strange communication reached the human fleet, not through conventional signals, but directly into the minds of every person present. It was not language as humans understood it, but a complex pattern of mathematical concepts and quantum states. Dr. Corey, working frantically with the ship's AI, managed to interpret fragments. "They're trying to communicate," she told Reyes, her voice shaking. "They're saying they didn't understand. They thought our physical form was an aberration in reality, a mistake to be corrected." "Tell them we are not a mistake," Reyes replied coldly. "We are humanity." As the dodecahedron continued to collapse, more of the Voidborn's communication became clear. They had existed for billions of years, perceiving reality through quantum states rather than physical matter. To them, the solid, deterministic universe that humans inhabited was an impossibility, a paradox that threatened the quantum superposition they called home. New Horizon had been the first human colony to deploy quantum entanglement communication on a massive scale. The Voidborn had perceived this as an invasion of their realm, a tearing of the veil between states of existence. They had not sought to destroy, merely to correct, to return the quantum anomaly to its proper state of indeterminacy. They had not understood that they were ending conscious lives. Now, as their homeworld collapsed and their existence faced extinction, they offered a form of surrender. They would retreat to the edges of known space, never to interact with humanity again. On the bridge of the Vengeance, Admiral Rise faced the most momentous decision in human history. The fleet could complete its mission, eliminating the Voidborn entirely. Vengeance would be absolute. The 15 million souls of New Horizon would be avenged. Or they could accept the surrender, sparing a species that had existed before the first human ancestors walked upright. A species that had acted not from malice, but from a fundamental misunderstanding of reality itself. "What are your orders, Admiral?" Commander Park asked quietly. Ray stared at the collapsing dodecahedron on the display. She thought of New Horizon, of Captain Chen's final message, of the 15 million voices silenced not by hatred, but by incomprehension. "Ceasefire," she said finally. "All ships, ceasefire immediately." A shocked silence fell over the bridge. "Transmit to the Voidborn," Rice continued. "We accept their retreat on one condition. They must help us understand how to retrieve those they have corrected. If New Horizon can be restored, even partially, they earn their continued existence." Dr. Corey looked up from her console, eyes wide. "Do you think it's possible to bring them back?" "I don't know," Rise admitted. "But if there's even a chance, we owe it to the 15 million to try." As the human fleet maintained its position, the collapsing dodecahedron stabilized. The Voidborn communication shifted, becoming more structured, more deliberate, as if they were attempting to adapt to human understanding. They could not restore New Horizon completely. They explained through the mathematical patterns Dr. Corey had begun to decode. The correction had been too thorough. the quantum states too fully redistributed, but they could perhaps retrieve echoes, imprints of the consciousness that had once existed there. It was not victory, it was not vengeance, but it was perhaps something more important: understanding. 3 months later, Admiral Reyes stood before the World Council once more. The fleet had returned, diminished but triumphant in its own way. 120,000 ships had been lost, over 1 million lives with them. But humanity had faced an incomprehensible enemy and emerged not just alive, but wiser. "The Voidborn have withdrawn beyond the Orc cloud," she reported. "They continue to provide quantum data that our scientists are using to develop a retrieval matrix. We have already succeeded in recovering fragmentary consciousness patterns from 300 New Horizon colonists. The recovered were not truly alive, more like complex quantum ghosts, partial recordings of the people they had once been. But they remembered. They could communicate. They could help humanity understand what had happened and ensure it never happened again. We went seeking vengeance," Rice concluded. "We found something more valuable. A new understanding of existence itself. The universe is stranger than we ever imagined, filled with intelligences that perceive reality in ways we can barely comprehend." She paused, looking at the faces of the council members. "We are not alone in the cosmos, and not everything that seems monstrous is evil. Sometimes, the greatest threat is simply failing to understand one another." As humanity began the long process of recovery and adaptation, the significance of what had transpired became clear. The Voidborn incident had not merely been a conflict, it had been first contact of the most profound kind, a collision between fundamentally different modes of existence. The same quantum technologies that had inadvertently provoked the Voidborn were now being harnessed to communicate with them, to bridge the gap between physical determinism and quantum superposition. Humanity's understanding of physics advanced decades and months, and in a specially constructed quantum chamber on Earth, the partial consciousness of Captain Maya Chen, recovered from the moment of New Horizons erasure, helped guide humanity toward a future where such a tragedy might never be repeated again. The stars still beckoned, but now humanity moved toward them with greater caution and wisdom, knowing that the universe held wonders and terrors beyond imagination, and that sometimes they were one and the same. The armada of 700,000 ships remained, positioned throughout human space, not as instruments of war, but as guardians of understanding. A reminder that humanity's greatest strength was not its capacity for vengeance, but its ability to learn, to adapt, and ultimately to forgive. For in the vast darkness between the stars, there was room enough for all forms of existence, even those that could barely comprehend one another.